I'm Mia Simone, and I'm reading for you Where Dragons Die by Ash. Sparrows fluttered about patches of ivy fused to the wall of the whitewood rooftop villa. Though they could only be seen when they darted from the leaves, they chirped with a demanding tone. The birds annoyed Maelstrom Redtail. Their very presence reminded him of his codename, his failure. Opposite of Mael, a brown-skinned teen nursed a spiced tea. She had a lively round face and compassionate eyes. The girl spoke passionate words to coax Mael out of his aloof demeanor. The sparrows outside were louder. Whatever plea Cheryl was working up to, Mael wanted nothing to do with it. He was done with his tea, done with delicate pastries, done with the softly decorated cafe, and done being a gesture for the birds. Wroth, Mael stood in the chair, jeered back. Hanging bells tittered at Mael's retreat. Old ladies in sun hats leered at the failure of Fire Arrow. He charged past them all, pushing their gazes out of his mind and putting distance between him and sparrows. But Cheryl Bloom kept at his heels. "I was talking to you." Her voice was hard with frustration, and her authenticity snapped Mael out of his spell. Cheryl caught Mael's wrist. He rebuked her with a spin and a glower, and she immediately let go. Mael fondled his gold-plated armlet, trying to rub away the feel of Cheryl's pink velvet glove on his skin. He let go of his frustration with a sigh. This wasn't her fault. Mael kept his voice level. "You may be of my house, but you are not of my family. This does not concern you." "I never said it was my problem. I'm not here to swear a blood oath to avenge your brother. I'm here because you need to talk about his death." "I will not," Mael started loudly, but the crowd stilled his tongue. Around him, people walked leisurely, enjoying the idyllic weather and false security. "There are things I cannot tell you. I swore vows, and I will not tarnish my virtue for closure." "Be vague," Cheryl coaxed. She gestured affectionately towards his face, stopping just short of touching his cheek. "Our life has been a flight against the wind, Mael. After everything that happened with Val, you know I could keep a secret." Mael brought his eyes to the mosaic roof tiles and tried under the sigh. Deliberately, Mael's eyes slowly trailed up the length of Cheryl's form. He took in the red, pinks, and cherry wood brown of her casual wear. The long pink and crimson of her riding skirt remained open in the front from her wide hips. A red neckline brought out the crimson in her cheeks. Pink eyes proved her blush was more than a trick of the light, and her sorrow only made Mael feel worse. "You're better off not knowing," he whispered. Her fiery eyes to him. "I don't need your protection." Before she voiced her protest, a commotion drew their attention. On the east side of the tower, an adolescent night dragon, in full defiance of the laws of conduct, swooped over the public. Square-like wings kicked up debris, soiling refined garments into the play clothes of children. High-born consumers complained as a chorus, fleeing into open roof shops. The dark purple scaled creature descended towards Mael and Cheryl, wiggling its finned, stubbed tail to come to a stop. The night dragon leaned into the wind and shook his salamander-like face with contempt. Shamelessly, the cause of all this ruckus jumped off the dragon's shoulders with a somersault and tumbled over the mosaic tiles. Caeric Quillborn, noble of the night script, came out of the roll mere steps away from Cheryl and Mael. He vaulted to his feet like an entertainer awaiting applause. Though Caeric was of age with them, he wore dirty riding leathers, styled his sandalwood brown hair with the wind, and had the yellow-tinged smile of a child trying out his first saddle. Receiving no cheers, he hailed the nobles of Fire Arrow with a raised palm and took off his dirty riding goggles. Though between the goggles and Caeric's face, it was harder to say which was dirtier. "Caeric!" Cheryl shrieked. "I heard bells ringing and came to investigate. Turns out it was the sound of boredom on the wind. That wasn't something I could tolerate." Caeric told Mael, and only Mael, before pulling him into a full embrace. Caeric was a tad shorter, but his wide shoulders made Mael look frail by comparison. Mael wasn't thin by anyone's standards, but he had the lithe muscles of a hunter. Caeric was built like a toad, surprisingly agile for his girth. Only when their embrace ended did Caeric glance back at Cheryl. He pointed at her with a thumb and exaggerated sneer. "Well, that explains the boredom." "You can't ride your dragon onto rooftops. This is a marketplace," Cheryl yelled. She clawed at the base of her ponytail as if to pry a reason for Caeric's deplorable behavior out of her skull. "Grumpa's fine." Caeric pretended this addressed her concern. Off to the side, Cheryl watched as some of the highborn were trying to grab the night dragon's reins. Grumpa gave an irritated groan. "No, he isn't," Cheryl snapped. She broke off, running to clean up Caeric's mess rather than making his dragon suffer. "Heard about your brother," Caeric said. He swept a hand through his greasy hair. "You up for a patrol? I'm sure there's a brigand out there in need of a quick death." Mael shrugged. "I guess." Caeric stepped forward and put his hand on Mael's shoulder. Hey, don't worry about Cheryl. Her mask's on too tight. Male nodded and looked at Cheryl. She was repeatedly putting one hand over her heart to apologize. The sight of a flustered face brought a smile to Male's lips. Male chuckled. You really shouldn't do that to her. She'll have a panic attack. Like that's new, Carrick yawned. Cheryl brought Grandpa back to the boy's side and put her hands on her hips to scold Carrick proper. Do you have any idea how much trouble you could be in? Carrick ignored her and ran up Grandpa's round snout to get to the harness at the base of his neck, or more accurately, where the head connected with the shoulders. Hey, I'm talking to you, Cheryl yelled at Carrick. Carrick paid her no mind and pulled Grandpa's reins into his hands. Male followed Carrick onto the back of his night dragon. The majestic creature snorted at the unbonded rider. You are talking to me. Carrick put his hand on the wrong side of his chest in a mock show of respect, and I appreciated every word of it. Carrick pulled the reins back, and Grandpa let out a very put-upon bellow. The lazy dragon flapped his large wings, blowing hats off heads and flipping skirts back. What few consumers were still outside yelled curses and joined the others who were already seeking refuge in boutiques and beauty parlors. Cheryl stood with a defiant sneer on her face as her riding skirt flipped up and back to reveal her tight riding pants. Nice pants, Cheryl. Carrick pushed a palm skyward in approval. Male finds them fetching. Carrick, I'm going to jam my thumbs into your eyes, you wingless wretch! Cheryl's screams continued, but Carrick didn't wait around to hear her threats. With bemused sympathy, Male watched the crowd come out to give Cheryl an undeserving taste of their wrath. It was an experience Male knew all too well. Soaring high above the domain surrounding Feather's breath, Carrick and Male stood on the back of their dragons. Next to each other, their soaring fire dragon and night dragon were an odd couple. Fire dragons were some of the smallest dragons in the kingdom, but night dragons were by far the bulkiest. Their bodies weren't quite as tall as elephants, but they were just as thick. Their wings jutted out from shoulder to hip, their span easily 3 times the length of the bloated creature. The long square-like sails kept the purple-scaled dragons aloft despite their massive weight. Carrick yelled over the gust of wind, only his eyes protected by his common riding goggles. We'll find the guy that killed your brother and put an end to him. Male took off the black wood mask of his family and didn't reply until his mask was retied in a military double knot. With the eyes of the mask facing Male's chest, the hawk of flames was in its proper descent. It's not that easy, Carrick. Carrick waited for his friend to go on and rolled his eyes when Male didn't. I know you can't tell me what's going on because of some dumb, useless thing like politics, but that just means a highborn killed him. We can wait for the pompous Order of Windsong to climb on their saddles and do something about it, or we can declare a blood oath and take the rust scale down. Male brought Gleam's wings under the night dragons, flying in tandem to yell at him. You're not listening. This is high-level politics. It's something that I can't tell you or Cheryl about. It's my burden. It's my responsibility, and I don't need your help taking vengeance on this sea sneezer. So it's about Stormblade. Carrick took that in with a thoughtful nod. Die 6 deaths, Male swore. I'm not going to tell you what happened. This isn't stupid gossip about shallow girls trying to get married. It's war, Carrick finished Male unspoken thought, and the very words sobered him at last. Male threw his hands in the air. Why can't you drop it? Because I'm your best friend, Carrick said. He put his hand on his heart and walked along his dragons, humorous. If you're going to war, I'm going to fight by your side. I don't care what House Fire Arrow or Night Script or the Red Tail family or the Quillborns or anyone else says about it. I'm not going to lose another friend. Not after what happened to Val. What about persistent, annoying girls looking to even the score? Carrick followed Male's gaze to find Cheryl flying next to a noble on a silent dragon. The forest-toned creature resembled a giant bearded dragon with wings. It flapped vigorously to keep aloft. The silent scythe rider had a green sash over his riding jacket, advertising his position as a demi-bass, one of the lawmen of the kingdom. Cheryl wore the smoke of a cat who dragged in the biggest, fattest rat in the manor. I'll talk to you later, Carrick said with a sigh. Carrick Quillborn, the silent scythe man spoke with an ostentatious voice that fit the chinlith hair too well. By the authority given to me by Domitor Levins Timberton, I bind and compel you to follow me, lest the honor of your family suffers for your transgressions. Carrick looked down at the silent dragon, desperately flapping to keep himself flying at the same speed as the night and fire dragons. As tempting as it is to dishonor my family, I'll comply with your mandate. I'd hate for your dragon to lose its breath from the strain, Mr. Carrick rolled his hand in the air to get the man's name. Pepperborn. The noble rose his bearded chin. Basil Pepperborn, initiated demivas of Feather's Breath. Yeah, spare me the life story. He jumped into his saddles and dove back toward the white stone towers of Feather's Breath. The demivas tipped his green-tanned hat towards Cheryl and followed Carrick back to the city. Cheryl watched him go with a certain admiration before leering at Mail. What was that about? Mail asked. Some men don't act like a bunch of low-born wyvern riders, so you probably don't recognize courtesy when you see it. Cheryl stuck her nose up. Not something I care about. Mail checked the thread of his hip quiver. Why bring Carrick to the pyre? He had it coming, Cheryl said matter-of-factly. He's a turd kindler who thinks he can get away with anything because his grand-uncle is archdometer of the law. He can't get away with anything, and you know that, Mail said. He held a stern look until Cheryl turned her head. Mail undid the bottom knot of his mask and fastened the strap to his head. Where are you going? Home. Mail felt a certain peace when he saw the 4 towers of Redtail Manor. The 3 outer towers of stone stood equidistant from the thicker central tower of the family. Connecting wooden bridges, accented with lattice-work arches, brought visitors, low-born servants, and fire arrow lords together on burnable tinder. Family banners were unfurled in welcome, the diving hawks of fire inviting all to mourn the loss of Tyrus Redtail. Visitors congregated on the balconies, sipping sweet spirits, searing skewered steaks, and speaking soft sounds of sympathy. Scavengers, Mel decided. Largest among the vultures were the robed men and women of the order. They took their time eating and drinking, trying to make their extended stay seem natural, but all knew that they were there to match a dead noble to a dead dragon. Their heads turned in unison to follow Mail's entry. Mail's younger sister, Flit, waited by Gleam's steed home. Once Mail had Gleam's saddle off, the red dragon dove headfirst into his bed of wood chips and bone shards. He lit out a cough of fire, igniting fresh twigs, and settled into the smoky bed. Flit was adorned in a mourner's smock of black silk. Though the girl was younger than Mail by over 5 years, she looked to her brother with intense judgment. Where were you? Meeting Cheryl, Mail said to dismiss her and made no eye contact on his way to the wake. If you're planning to marry the girl, then wait for her debut and stop wasting the family's time, she chided. My personal life is my business, Flit. Mail climbed the stairs. It's the family's business when Tyrus is laying in a box because of your incompetence. Mail came off the ascending steps. 2 servants stood beside the double doors, but the lowborn kept their curious eyes forward. Otherwise, they were alone. Mail leaned down to bring his face close to his sister's. Flit, you need to shut your mouth. He lowered his voice in hopes that she would do the same. Flit raised her chin but said no more. The low-born servants pulled open the doors in tandem the moment Mail stood up straight. Brother and sister entered the lesser parlor. Curious guests looked at the entrance, but only a thick gaze of incense greeted them. Nobles from Fire Arrow and the other 4 houses stood in mismatched groups. Everyone was on their best behavior here, which is to say everyone was lying. Every noble in blue were kept at a distance, respectable but never cordial. Mail's mother was engaged in conversation with an elderly man in red dragon armor. She met Mail's eye, but turned her attention back to the dragon knight. Giving up on talking to his mother, Mail filled a hand plate with seasoned raw meats, peppered succulents, and a dollop of blood pudding. Finding the solarium and dining chambers full, Mail made his way to the ballroom. He found the people from Tyrus's work and ordinate school classmates that he called friends. One of them caught Mail's gaze, so he made his way to a vacant corner of the room. He seared his meal on a nearby brazier, using the skewer to scoop the pudding into his mouth. At the center of the room, harmonizers of the order sang songs of death beside his brother's ashes. All that was left of his brother filled an ornate red vase with 2 fire dragon handles. Conversation ceased when a woman with long black hair could no longer hold back her tears. Beside her, a man that resembled Tyrus with a mustache offered her comfort. The man, so like his brother, seemed to glare at Mail. Mail moved to a servant carrying fire wine and didn't look back. It makes me sick to call you my brother. Mail hadn't seen his sister's approach, but she seemed intent on berating him for his failure. You have responsibilities, and you drink and run off to secure marriages. This isn't something you can run away from. Flit was going to continue, but a deep voice cut her off. Flit, Mail's father, Solomon Redtail, bellowed. That's enough. Make sure our guests don't wander off. But I can... Flit started to protest, but his deep cherry wood brown eyes sent her into the crowds. Solomon Redtail cut an intimidating figure, even in elegant black and red garb. The barrel-chested man took in the guests like a sentry, only satisfied when Flit was out of sight. Mail's father wordlessly beckoned him to follow. Mail stuffed his mouth and put plate and goblet on a bare counter. They exited onto the sky deck that faced the central tower of the manor. Mail had been there once before, during a debut of some aunt. He wasn't even a whelp yet, maybe 6, 7 at the oldest. He walked up to the edge and stared down at the marketplace over a dozen stories below. He could see the lights of people still doing business past sundown, and the further he crept past the lip, the more he could see of the lowborn. Skydecks had no railing, but instead of making him afraid, he was emboldened, determined to see how far over the edge he could peer. Someone pushed him. He waved his arms to catch his balance, but his pusher held his shirt. It was Tyrus, laughing at his younger brother's fear. "Turd kindler!" Mail had shouted. He pushed at his brother. "What if I fell?" "I had your shirt," Tyrus said through his chuckling. "That could have ripped." "Only if you lost your balance." Tyrus's smile gave Mail pause and stuck with him for many years to come. "Come, Val and Carrick are looking for you," Tyrus explained, like the near-death experience meant nothing for him. Clanking chains stirred Mail from his memories. On the opposite side, noble vessels lowered a drawbridge, their figures mere silhouettes seen through arrow slit. Wood hit stone with the powerful chukunk, and rattled chains gave way to the ever-present howl of the wind. Father and son crossed. There were no railings for them to hold. Highborn did not fear the wind and only looked down to dive. Inside the main chamber, dozens of fire arrow and none from the other houses gathered around a large strategic map of the kingdom. There were chairs scattered about the room, but all faced inward. Tables were filled with forgotten meals, half-finished drinks, rolls of tobacco, and mysterious parchments. Mail had only been in this room a handful of times, when he was told Gleam's lineage, when he met his family to discuss Val, and before his fateful trip to conquest the quarterback. Now he wasn't there as a child talking to his family, but a tale talking to his house. There were important people here, old men and women decorated with the clothes of their office and marks of honor. They were focused on the map etched in yellow stone. Tiny figurines of red and blue were arranged along the west and northeast parts of the kingdom, where Stormblade held the most power. Standing close to the entrance was one of the captains who served under Mail's father, Morrow Crimkin. Morrow was a handsome man, only younger than Mail's own father by a decade or so. He had gold earrings and studs and hoops, all clasped around rubies, marking his honor within Dragonguard. Around his wrist was a tight wedding circlet of gold engraved with chants of the order. Morrow was in his finest and extravagant red silk shirt and brocade white whiting pants with the mark of his family on both sides. A standing man with a drop above his head, all in red. Yet the most distinguishing feature on his visage was the half-beard over his face, short-trimmed facial hairs that covered only the left side of his face, save a goatee on the right. He was amiable toward Mail and stepped back to make room for his father. "Nice of your son to join us, Major Solomon." Morrow made a show of putting a hand to his heart. He sat next to an older man who had a shrewd, scarred face, the look of an aged warrior. His father shut the double doors behind Mail. "I hope you got more than herons." Mail's uncle expressed anxiety that was already heavy in the room. "Cheryl Bloom didn't know anything," Mail explained. He kept his head low. "Carrick Quillborn either. He knows something's up and offered a blood oath, but..." The eldest among them, the old man next to Morrow Crimkin, rose to his feet. Mail did not recognize the man at first, but the room hushed when he stood. The 90-year-old had a deep scar that jogged Mail's memory. The scar ran from his chin to his missing ear. He was Sulfin Daybreaker, the one-eared hero of the Rust War, an archdometer of courage, leader of House Fire Arrow. "They will all know soon," Sulfin spoke with a harsh, gravelly voice. "The scrolls we obtained at Conquest detail correspondences with pirates. They outline a distribution of funds in both directions, and the proof is undeniable. Stormblade has been hiring privateers to attack their ships. They killed men born low and high to gain the support of the Vazans and armed their merchants with ballistae and trebuchets before our warnings fell on deaf ears. But now even the king won't be able to defend them. All will know of their treachery, and you," the old man put his large callous hand on Mail's shoulder. He straightened with pride. "You will have vengeance for your brother's death," Mail strummed Redtail. "I promise you this." Tears welled in Mail's eyes. "Thank you." This has been Where Dragons Die, written by the author Ash. I'm Mia Simone, and you can find me on Twitter at Mia S'mores or on Instagram at __s'mores. We hope you'll stop by to read Chapter 4. Thank you.